Hey, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know. Help support our channel by going over to ecoware.us. We carbon offset the production, shipping, and life cycle of every product, and we plant a tree for every order.
And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. With their new premium app, which you can get by going to our link down below, a 30-day free trial, you're going to get a lot of new cool features that'll let you plan your next EV trip. Go to abetterrouteplanner.com and you'll see what I mean.
And we're sponsored by our friends at the Solar Powered Hotels in Schaumburg, Illinois, the Fairfield Inn & Suites by Marriott, and the Town Place Suite Hotel right next door. They're both connected and they're both solar powered.
So this week, Tesla broke $1,000 a share. And I've been asked, so many people are asking, what's going on? Why did it break $1,000 a share?
Why did it do it? Well, first of all, it had been hovering pretty close to $1,000 a share for a little while. I mean, 800, 900.
Right.
A lot of excitement there. So whatever piece of news was going to push it over the edge wasn't necessarily going to be the piece of news that was responsible to make it $1,000 a share. It's a culmination of a lot of different things.
And that's kind of what is in their impact report. Tesla just released their 2019 impact report. And for those of you who just maybe have skirted around the issue of Tesla and you're like, well, I know they make electric cars, but I don't know much else. The impact report is actually quite good. It tells you basically their whole business and what they're doing. And so we thought we'd go through it, summarize it for you, because who's going to read a 57-page report, and tell you what's in there. And as Elon said, it's worth reading.
Absolutely. It's worth reading, it is. That's what he said, and that's how he talks.
And just a little snippet that we found here on page 13 alludes to the million-mile battery, because I got to remind you folks, by now, Battery Day was supposed to have taken place.
Right.
So when they wrote this report, they're probably thinking oh, we can put all the Battery Day stuff in there, no problem, because everybody would have heard about it. But I think they had to go through and do find and replace and take a bunch of things out. It was really cool to see that there was a reference to the million-mile battery. Now, why would you even mention a million-mile battery unless you were able to do it?
I guess that's a good question for all the legacy auto manufacturers who are claiming that they have million-mile battery technology when their cars probably can't do that.
So to start off in the report, they point out why they're doing this. Tesla wants to transition to sustainable energy as fast as possible. And since the onset of the shelter-in-place and travel restrictions, there have been dramatic increases in air quality, and CO2 emissions have dropped greater than 4% in 2020. Now, according to the Global Carbon Project, total carbon emissions for 2019 will hit another record high of over 43 gigatons of carbon for the year. And that is why Tesla does what it does. They're trying to reduce carbon in our atmosphere. And as they pointed out here in this chart, electricity and transportation make up almost 50% of that carbon.
Okay, but Tesla's a car company, so how are they going to possibly achieve the electricity generation part if they're only addressing the car part?
They also make energy.
What do you mean?
Yeah, solar and batteries. That's another huge part of what Tesla makes.
And so the solar is used to collect the energy during the day, and the battery is used to store that energy during the day and give the energy to you at night.
Exactly.
So that way you have constant power. That's all 100% renewable.
But let's go to calculating their impact, because a lot of people still claim that, well, ICE cars and EV cars are about the same. They're both bad for the environment to make them. So Tesla put a lot of time into this report showing that, no, that's not really true. They did say, though, that calculating the impact of EVs versus ICE is not straightforward. It's a hard task to do because there are some common omissions that Tesla has seen, including these 5.
Using WLTP or EPA fuel or energy consumption data, which overestimates fuel economy and underestimates emissions, rather than real-world data.
Not taking into account the higher energy efficiency of Tesla's powertrains.
Assuming that the average EV needs a battery replacement at some point in its life.
Not accounting for emissions generated through oil refining and the transportation process.
And using outdated data for the carbon impact of cell manufacturing. So those 5 things are giant factors when studies are looking into what's really better? Is it the gas-burning cars or the electric cars? Because, electric cars are full of those batteries, and we don't know anything about them, and we're going to use old data and improper accounting techniques to show that battery vehicles are only just a little bit better than traditional cars.
And as Tesla points out, it's not just CO2 that we should be counting. Yes, that's important, but also there are pollutants that come out of the tailpipe of every ICE vehicle. And so the World Health Organization has said that 4.2 million people are going to die every year of air pollution, and that air pollution causes more premature deaths than smoking or infectious disease. So this is important. This is an important problem to solve. And here on this map, you can see the effects of reduced ICE vehicle traffic in Europe, February 2020 versus May 2020.
And you can see the dramatic improvements of air pollution levels when people are driving their cars less.
Yeah. Here's what Tesla didn't do. Tesla didn't assume that the grid will keep getting greener, even though it will. They could have easily said this rosy forecast of like, well, every year the grid is going to have more solar, so it's going to get better. No, they didn't do that. For this that you're looking at right here, this chart, they assumed that it'll stay the same, which it won't. It's actually going to get greener.
So they're being extra conservative here. This is the worst case outlook, essentially. Assuming that the grid does get greener, those blue bars are going to get lower and lower for average life cycle emissions.
So we're looking here at the average life cycle emissions in the U.S., grams of CO2 per mile driven. And so if you look at an ICE car there, that's the gray bar over on the right. The solid gray at the bottom is how much CO2 per mile it takes to make the car. And then the lighter gray on top is how much it uses over the lifetime of the car. And Tesla has calculated that the average car in the US lasts for 17 years and drives for about 12,000 miles a year. So as you can see, and this is a perfect chart to pull out the next time someone says to you that like, well, ICE cars are about the same as EVs. No, they're not. You choose what you'd like to use there. For instance, if you have a Model 3 that you plug into largely solar powered, then the second bar from the left is what you're using. Or if you drive a Model 3 for personal use and you're grid charged, then you're the fourth one from the left. Still, look at the difference between that and an ICE car.
You're close to a fifth to a quarter of CO2 emissions, and that is if the grid stays the same for the lifetime of you owning that vehicle.
And that's including building both cars.
Right.
So now we go to this graph, which is an energy efficiency graph. So this is showing the energy efficiency EPA range in miles per kilowatt hour. What are the three cars over on the left that are the most efficient?
You have the Model 3 Standard Range Plus, you have the Model 3 all-wheel drive, and then you have the Model Y all-wheel drive.
Yeah, a small SUV. Then we've got the Hyundai Kona, awesome. We got the Chevy Bolt, awesome. And then the Model S Long Range Plus, the Nissan Leaf, the Model X Long Range Plus, followed by the Jaguar I-Pace, Mercedes EQC, Ford Mach-E all-wheel drive, Audi e-tron, and the Porsche Taycan. So as Tesla pointed out here, predominantly due to the lack of reliable data, various third-party studies tend to overstate the actual energy requirement and therefore the associated emissions for battery manufacturing. In fact, in 2019, the emissions from producing a full EV were nearly comparable to the emissions from producing an average ICE vehicle. That said, battery manufacturing technology continues to improve rapidly, and we expect the EV manufacturing energy requirement and associated emissions to drop significantly in the near future.
People might be asking, how is that possible? How could you possibly have fewer CO2 emissions producing EVs going forward?
Well, one way is solar panels. Tesla said, our goal is to install as many solar panels as is practically feasible on the roofs of all of our manufacturing facilities. Yeah, they're big, flat factories. They're going to be covered with solar panels, and that is going to bring down the CO2 of the energy used to make the vehicles.
So it's interesting to think that it's not like you're building the battery pack of this car and just CO2 emissions are coming out of the battery pack and you're like, oh no. It's that you need energy to do that. And so the cleaner the energy you're using, the less CO2 you are actually putting in the atmosphere.
Exactly. So here's an interesting chart. This shows that from 2017 to 2019, Tesla was actually able to lower the CO2 emissions per mile of the Model 3 by reducing factory emissions and by having vertical integration. When you have to get parts delivered from all over the world, you have ships and trucks that are using a lot of CO2. When you can vertically integrate and make that part close to your factory or in your factory, the transportation costs and the CO2 for transport go way down.
And another point here is just energy efficiency within the factory. The more energy efficient you can be inside your factory, the cleaner it's going to end up being because you're going to need to require less energy to have everything run.
So here's another misconception a lot of people have. They think you put an EV on the road and then your battery just dies after a couple of years and you got to throw it away.
And yeah, that doesn't happen.
Right. Let's look at this chart here that was in the impact report showing that a Tesla electric car, here's the battery after 175 or 200,000 miles. It's still going strong. It's still got 85% life in it. Now, compare that to a ICE vehicle that has 200,000 miles on it. Your engine is probably ready to go if it hasn't already, right? There's something that if you haven't serviced it, and keep in mind, we haven't serviced the battery here. by 200,000 miles, you've probably changed your water pump. You've probably changed your timing belt. You've probably had a whole bunch of things that you had to change out in parts in the car. And if you haven't, that engine is about to go.
Right. You're getting pretty close to where the head gasket's going to blow, and you're just going to, bills start piling up, time to look for a new car. What does not happen in a Tesla is that. Yes, the battery will degrade, but only to about 85% over 200,000 miles.
What I also thought was interesting is that the average car in the US lasts for 17 years or 200,000 miles, but in Europe, the average car only lasts for 130,000 miles. And you might be asking, why is that?
Europe is smaller than the United States, and as a result, Americans drive a little bit further, but for every trip that you go on, it's not necessarily the miles that is going to be beating up your car, it's the parking it.
Right. It's time too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically the number of years your car's on the road before it just starts to rust out and die.
And again, the Model S and Model X are made out of aluminum, so they very rarely are taken off the road for rusting because there's hardly anything to rust.
Now, Tesla says a common question we hear is what happens to Tesla vehicle battery packs once they reach their end of life? An important distinction between fossil fuels and lithium-ion batteries as an energy source is that while fossil fuels are extracted and used once, the materials in a lithium-ion battery are recyclable. When petroleum is pumped out of the ground, chemically refined, and then burned, it releases harmful emissions into the atmosphere that are not recovered for reuse. Battery materials, in contrast, are refined and put into a cell and will remain in the cell at the end of their life, when they can be recycled to recover valuable materials for reuse over and over again.
Right. So you don't drive down the road with a giant balloon hanging off the tailpipe of your car, and then when you get home, you go, oh, good. And you take that big balloon full of pollutants and carbon dioxide and put it up to some machine that recycles it and turns it back into gasoline for you to drive the next day.
Wow, you know what? That's an amazing idea. What if when you got home from your commute, you took a balloon of your stuff and you had to just release it into your house? How many people would then want to drive an ICE car?
Well, you'd need a really big balloon.
So you'll see from this chart here, there hasn't been that much recycled at Gigafactory. And the reason is, Tesla pointed out, is because there haven't been that many batteries they've actually gotten back. Most of the batteries they've gotten back have been test batteries that they've sent out. The only other batteries they've really gotten from consumers have been from Tesla taxi kind of services like Tesloop, where they've actually been driving so many miles.
Right, over a million miles.
Right, where they've worn out the battery. Other than that, they haven't needed to recycle them yet because the company's only about 8 years old. I mean, the Model S is from 2012, so most of those batteries are fine.
Right. It's going to become a lot more important in the future when all of these, thousands and thousands of Model 3s on the road are finally going to be, put to rest. But I mean, we are probably looking at 10, 15 years. If you take a look at all the cars that Tesla has sold, they have a nice ramp so they can actually start getting good at recycling batteries slowly over time as those cars start to come off the road.
And I think we're going to hear about this at Battery Day because I think instead of picturing this as a problem, they're looking at this as an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And you don't think about water as a problem when you're making anything, but you use water to make almost anything, and we don't have enough fresh water on Earth already, so it's good to keep track of it. Here's a chart showing what Tesla's done to reduce their water consumption. This is the annual water consumption per Tesla vehicle produced in cubic meters, and they've been able to reduce it quite a bit in just a short amount of time.
Well, and so the interesting thing here is that Tesla points out that it isn't necessarily that they're just like pouring less water on the car when they're done making it. It's that they're producing energy in a more efficient way that doesn't require water.
They say while many recognize the impact that power generation has on CO2 emissions, its impact on water consumption is less appreciated. Power generation is one of the leading causes of water withdrawal in the U.S., as water for thermoelectric power is used to generate electricity with steam-driven turbine generators and also to cool power-producing equipment. This means that every kilowatt hour of clean solar energy produced not only lowers CO2 emissions, but also lowers water consumption.
So by using more solar power, they're able to save more water. That is just another one of those Tesla things.
Yep. So then Tesla pointed out that in 2019, Tesla sold 367,000 EVs globally. That's twice as many as any other automaker. And that's automakers that have been in the EV business for quite some time, like Nissan. And they said in 2019, we generated almost $600 million of revenue selling zero-emission regulatory credits to other OEMs. All of the proceeds from such sales will be used for building new factories to produce EVs that will continue to displace ICE vehicles.
So this is essentially a feedback loop. The more EVs they sell, the more of these regulatory credits they, conceivably could pull in, according to politics. And then You simply take all that money, pour it back into making more EVs, and you've got yourself a feedback loop.
And Tesla pointed out, while many OEMs introduced new EV models in the past 2 years, their actual global deliveries of EVs increased only marginally. We hope that every car manufacturer will strive to produce hundreds of thousands of EVs per year. Significant reduction of emissions will only be achieved if all car makers push for an industry-wide shift to EVs. Now, how many companies hope that their competition will be able to put out as many widgets as they are putting out?
Right. It's not something that usually gets put on any of their material. Even there might be some guy at the company who holds out hope, like, oh, I sure hope that some other company's going to do good things. It's another to like put it in your impact report.
And if you're wondering why Tesla's at $1,000 a share, maybe it's because instead of counting every penny and being bean counters, they're actually trying to put their hearts and souls into what they do.
Or maybe it's because they're outselling all of their competition. Now, you might be saying, but these automakers, they're selling lots of other cars. It doesn't matter because let me tell you from experience, when people get in an EV, it doesn't matter which one, they really like the driving experience. Having instant torque, instant power, regen braking, plug in at home, lower fuel costs, lower maintenance costs, all of these things add up, and the word is traveling fast. Lots of people are thinking about buying an EV for their next car, and as you can see, there's just not a lot to choose from.
Right.
And Tesla has some of the best on the market. That's why they're selling the most.
But they don't just make cars. They also make energy products like solar and batteries, and you can see here that as of the end of 2019, Tesla had installed almost 3.7 gigawatts of solar systems and cumulatively generated over 16.6 terawatt hours of emissions-free electricity. For reference, that is multiple times more energy generated by our installations than the total energy Tesla has used to run all of our factories since we began producing Model S in 2012. So take a look at this chart here, and it shows you how much every year they're adding to the generation that they are producing that is all renewable. Now, you might be saying what a lot of people say, which is, yeah, but Teslas are so expensive. Well, are they? Take a look at this chart here. This is showing you the Mercedes, the BMW, the Audi, and the Model 3 all in their same class. Who's cheaper?
The Model 3. And in that same class, it's not on the chart, but the Model 3 is outselling all three of them combined.
Now, here's a really interesting chart they put in here, which is that a lot of people who have had EV experience in the past with, say, a Leaf or something, they are used to having a very low range. So they have to have a second car, they believe, like an ICE car, so that they can do things they can't normally do in their Leaf, like if they have to go pick up their grandmother, in the next state over. Whereas here, as you can see on the upper right, is the Model S and X with a higher range. And so these people have learned, I don't need a second car. This does everything I need to do.
And so they drive more, and they are able to drive more, and people are actually able to buy those cars with confidence. They might live out in Ohio and need to travel long distances in order to get to work and to come home and to go visit grandma. They're not worried because they have the range for it. Whereas they would probably not be buying electric cars with smaller ranges.
And speaking of long distance travel, here's the EPA range of long range EVs. And again, the 4 cars on the left are all Teslas. And as you can see, the other EVs there just don't have the range.
Right. And there is a significant step change there from the Model Y, which has the shortest Tesla range in the long range category, to the Ford Mach-E. There's a clear step, and then everything else kind of follows behind it.
And then Tesla barely mentions this in their impact report, but they've got something called the Supercharger Network, which nobody else has.
Right. Let's just talk about the Supercharger Network for just 1 second, because it is probably Tesla's biggest moat, at least at the moment. It is a network of charging stations that span from coast to coast in the United States. It covers all of Europe. Mm-hmm. They're working their way on the eastern front of Europe. Tons and tons of areas in China, Japan, Korea. They've got really good, Australia,
New Zealand,
huge coverage. And what you can do at those stations is you pull in with a low battery because you're traveling long distance. You charge for 20 minutes. So you go to the bathroom, you maybe get, some water, cup of coffee, and you're back out on the road.
Yep.
The speed at which the Supercharger network works has been and continues to be some of the fastest chargers out there.
When we just did our trip, and it wasn't even version 3 superchargers, we were getting 500 to 600 miles an hour. All right, and let's take a look at active safety, because that's one of the things you're going to really care about when you're buying a vehicle. Tesla says, in 2019, a Tesla vehicle with autopilot engaged in the U.S. experienced just 0.3 accidents per million miles driven, while the U.S. average was 7 times higher. at 2 accidents per million miles driven. Even in cases where only active safety features were engaged, our vehicles had a 4.5 times lower collision rate than the US average in 2019. So to give it in a visual, here's the US average in the right in gray. Here's the different ways you could be driving in a Tesla. You could have no active safety features on at all, and you'd be that bar right there next to the gray.
Right.
Or you could have them all engaged, for instance, over on the left, and look at how much safer you are. 7 times safer.
Now, some people say, how is it possible that with no active safety features, Teslas have a much, much, much lower accident rate? Because we're not talking about fatalities. We're talking about getting into a collision.
Right.
Here's why. Teslas have remarkable handling. And the reason for that is the battery pack that is in the floor. So instead of a large, giant chunk of metal, which is your engine sitting in the front of your car, raised up high, and everything else is just to service that engine, Teslas have a really low center of gravity with that battery pack, which is the majority of the weight in the car, really low, perfectly centered between the two wheels. So it's a very controllable car. It has excellent braking. It also has excellent acceleration, which sometimes is a safety factor. And it has excellent handling. It's really hard to lose control of.
And let's talk about fire safety, because I think a lot of people think that EVs are synonymous with catching on fire. And as Tesla says, when the media reports a story about a vehicle fire, it is usually reporting on an EV fire. This is likely a result of the novelty of EV technology rather than the prevalence of EV-related fires compared to ICE vehicle-related fires. The reality is, when compared to Tesla vehicles, ICE vehicles catch fire at a vastly higher rate. According to the latest available data in 2018, there were over 180,000 vehicle fires in the US alone. So there's one Tesla fire for every 175 million miles versus one ICE fire for every 19 million miles. And keep in mind that this data includes Teslas that caught on fire that were in structures that caught on fire, so in buildings, or that were arson fires.
Yeah, taking a look at the graph again, you can see that a regular car is almost 10 times as likely to catch on fire than a Tesla. I wonder why. It's probably because of that just bottle of flammable fluid.
And let's talk about cybersecurity for cars, because it's not just Teslas that have to be kept secure. Basically, any new car today is a computer inside, and it controls many of the functions of the car. So as an auto manufacturer, you've got to keep that car secure. And as Tesla said, to date, we are the only major automotive company capable of continual software enhancements across its entire vehicle fleet.
So what does that mean?
Well, that means that if you find out that your car got hacked, you can immediately fix it. For example, when researchers found a vulnerability in the Model S key fob, they reported it to Tesla, allowing us to examine their report and engineer a new in-vehicle update for the key fob, making it even more secure within a matter of seconds of the update. So what are we talking about the update here?
So we're talking about over-the-air updates. So this is not new for most people. You might have a phone, and every once in a while, your phone's going to go, I'm ready to update. And you say, okay, update. And it says, I'm updating. And then it restarts, and then you have some new features. You definitely have new security features, which you don't even get to see. The exact same thing happens with Tesla vehicles. They have updates, and they say, I'm ready for an update. You say update, and it updates. You get additional features, and you get security updates.
And the reason they can do this is they belong to a bunch of programs where they let white hat hackers try to hack their vehicles. They don't just ask their employees to do it. They're part of the Bug Bounty Program and the Pwn to Own research competition, where they actually give away cars if you can hack their cars. And that means that you're getting the best hackers in the world trying to hack your software.
Because you're incentivizing hackers to, instead of hacking cars for nefarious purposes, you say, oh, I could hack the car and I could make a lot of money. Oh, I think I'm going to do that. So you're leveraging capitalism to make the cars better.
Now, I think we forget that Tesla isn't just a car company, and that when bad things happen on the earth, like hurricanes, Tesla is often there trying to make things better. From 2018 to 2019, Tesla provided disaster relief assistance to governments, nonprofit organizations, and individuals following hurricanes in North Carolina, Florida, and the Bahamas, and during wildfires in California and Australia. In response to hurricanes, we provided temporary clean power solutions to 15 critical infrastructure sites through our solar panels and mobile Powerwall units, serving over 15,000 people. We also supported 500 people impacted by the wildfires in California and dozens of animals displaced by Australia's bushfires by powering community relief centers and temporary housing. Many of the sites we supported immediately after a disaster are still powered by Tesla systems to this day.
So what does this mean? Basically, in the wake of a natural disaster, Tesla has boots on the ground bringing solar panels and batteries to those locations, which means that you now have a power plant wherever you need it. So that includes hospitals and temporary housing, as they mentioned there.
And if you don't watch this show, you probably haven't heard of it because Tesla doesn't do it for the publicity. Many companies will go out there for a big PR day. CEO will cut the red ribbon with the scissors to get the press.
Tesla isn't like that. They just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Again, a quiet little introduction of a new product in 2019 was the Megapack, which is 60% more energy dense than the Power Pack and is this amazing grid scale product like they have at the Hornsdale Battery in South Australia. This, again, is not the kind of thing you or I are going to buy, but utilities are, and this is a big deal. Using Megapack, Tesla can deploy an emissions-free 250 megawatt, 1 gigawatt hour power plant in less than 3 months on a 3-acre footprint, 4 times faster than a traditional fossil fuel power plant of that size. For utility-size installations, Megapack will act as a sustainable alternative to natural gas peaker power plants, which cost millions of dollars per day to operate and are some of the least efficient and most polluting plants on the grid. Instead, a Megapack installation can use stored excess solar or wind energy to support the grid's peak loads.
Right. So these things are basically giant batteries sucking up excess solar during the day and giving it back to the grid at night. And in the cases where power plants go offline, it's able to stabilize the grid in an instant. Right? Because batteries, you just flick a switch and they're on.
This next product, Solar Roof, not really heard about too much in the mass media because I guess they don't believe it's true or they don't think it's going to be a thing. But I want you to take a look at this picture here. It's a bunch of roofs, right? Pretty boring picture. One of those roofs is a solar roof. And by solar roof, we mean instead of putting just asphalt shingles on your roof, these are actual glass panels that have solar panels in some of them so that your roof is now an indestructible solar generating roof.
But wait, you said that they're made out of glass. How can they be indestructible?
That's kind of the magic here. We have glass now, like you probably have on the screen of your phone, which can be Gorilla Glass and other glasses that are stronger than what you think of as just like a pane of glass. So you can actually do more to this without damaging it than you can a normal roof tile. And just to point out, there's 5 million roofs installed in this country alone every year. So that means there's 5 million potential customers who would want this product, a product that instead of just going up there and keeping the rain off your house, not only does that, but makes money.
Right. Every single year, people, it starts raining and they go, uh-oh, it's starting to leak. And they go outside and they look at the roof and they're like, oh, it looks really crappy. And they talk to someone and they go, oh, yeah, dude, you need a new roof. And they go, oh, really?
I spend tens of thousands of dollars just to get a new one of the things I already had.
Right. And if Tesla can come in and say, hey, why put a dead roof on your roof when you could put a solar roof on there that'll be generating you money?
Oh, and so by the way, it's the middle one there that's the solar roof. You can't even tell.
Right.
So then in the impact report, they talk about their strength, which is their Tesla employees. They've got over 48,000 employees. And I just want to point out that one of the benefits of being a Tesla employee, almost all of them can get Tesla stock as part of their package. So it's really cool. You actually get every quarter to buy the stock at a reduced rate. And what that does is, first of all, I'm guessing by now most Tesla employees have been at least interested or intrigued to do it. That means you're probably going to become an owner of your own company. And that means when you go to work every day, knowing that you're an owner of the company changes how you feel about work.
That's true. And the other benefit is that if you're buying at a discounted rate, it means that when the stock goes up, or even if it just remains the same, you are making money, at least on paper, until you go to sell the stock. So when the stock jumped up to 1,000, Tesla employees who have been at the company for maybe even just a year, who have been paying into that, made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that if you worked at Tesla and you played your cards right, you could be looking at a lot of money, which is going to make you very happy and coming to work with a great attitude.
I also just want to point out there's a bunch of really cool programs that Tesla puts on that we don't talk much about, but I think they're worth mentioning. One of them is the Manufacturing Development Program. And to date, Tesla has placed over 100 high school students in their Manufacturing Development Program, which they started in 2017. It's a 2-year program for recent high school graduates near the Gigafactory in New York, Nevada, and Fremont to start as Tesla production associates while continuing their education in automation and robotics at a nearby community college. And that's not the only one. There's the START program, They partnered with 6 colleges across the country for an intensive 12-week capstone to provide students with smooth transition from college to full-time employment. So far, they've had 300 service technicians and a 90% placement rate each cycle. And there's the Tesla Tool and Die Apprenticeship. I didn't know this, but only 2% of the industry in the tool and die industry is under the age of 35. It is an aging industry where many people are retiring and leaving with all of that institutional knowledge. Tesla saw the need for new talent, so they started this program at Fremont, and it's a 2 to 4 year program with on-the-job training. And right now there's just 15 people in it, but soon there's going to be more as they expand this to multiple sites throughout the US. They also have the Tesla Internship program, and we've personally met some of their young college interns, and it's a very demanding and rewarding internship program where they learn a lot. There's 1,200 undergraduate and graduate university students per year during the fall, spring, and summer semesters. So if you're out there as a college student and you're interested, this could be a great way to work for a company that was selected by engineering students on Zippia as the number 2 most attractive to engineers.
Wow, that sucks. Number
Why is
2.
it so?
Yeah, number 2, it's not as good as number 1.
You know who number 1 is?
I don't know, what, like Apple?
SpaceX.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, rockets, electric cars, fair enough.
And they have a whole slew of programs for community engagement, including teacher externships, where they bring in teachers and help them to understand what the jobs of the future are so they can go back to their classrooms and teach that. They have the factory tour. They give 40,000 people a year factory tours at Fremont. And if you haven't done this, I highly recommend you call them up and try and get in on one because it's so cool. They also have Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, where they've had 200 middle school girls across 8 locations learning about engineering. And I just want to point out, Tesla is still a startup company. Like a lot of these programs that we're talking about are usually at mature companies that have been around for decades. This is a company that's, by all practical purposes, been around for about 10 years.
That's a good point.
And then, you get to the end of a report and there's the corporate governance page, and it's usually full of long-winded, boring statements about fiscal responsibility, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I was almost about to skip it when I noticed this. The reason why I think Tesla has hit $1,000 a share is this. They focus on long-term goals. Check this out. Tesla's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy requires a board willing to commit to long-term goals. The Tesla board has actively driven key decisions focused on achieving long-term growth and profitability, including decisions to manufacture and sell electric vehicles from the ground up, rather than simply build powertrains for OEMs. Establish Tesla-owned stores and service centers rather than use the franchised dealer system. Create a global network of superchargers to enable long-distance travel. Build the world's largest battery factory to meet our needs and reduce battery costs. Expand into energy generation, solar, and storage to create a vertically integrated, sustainable energy company. And compensate our CEO only if other shareholders realize tremendous value. Yeah, I want to stress that. Elon just earned his first paycheck.
Right. And it was actually not as much of a paycheck as it was a stock offering.
Right.
He's able to buy Tesla shares.
Right.
He's going to make a lot of money off of it.
But it'll take years before he gets it.
Right. He can't sell them for 5 years.
Right.
And that is everything that Tesla has going for it. And so in the beginning, when you start out with long-term goals, you don't have many short-term results.
Exactly.
When you're a long-term thinker and a long-term planner, when you're working really hard and people just aren't seeing any results and they're going like, you're not making a lot of cars. Why don't you just sell batteries and powertrains to all these other manufacturers? You'll make lots of money.
Exactly.
That is where Tesla said, no, we're going to do the right thing because these manufacturers are just going to take these electric vehicles and use them to sell so that they can sell more inefficient vehicles, because that's what those companies do. And they said, we're not going to just make electric vehicles. We're going to make a whole ecosystem.
Yes. From
the Supercharger Network, which is extraordinarily important. If you had a Tesla and you didn't have the Supercharger Network, it wouldn't be as exciting a car.
Right.
They said, we're going to allow for solar panels on people's roofs, so that way you can reduce your emissions as a consumer and make those choices. And they've done all of this without any advertising.
Yeah.
They have not advertised once. They haven't spent a single dollar on it. And I think that that is the most impressive thing probably of all, because their products speak for themselves so much that their customers are their salespeople.
So we'll put the link down below, and I agree with Elon. It's worth reading. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Now you know.